You may not care about the topic I'm about to talk about, but I do. I just merely wish for Netflix to take a look at these subplots from 2025 a little bit more carefully, instead of ignoring most of them. Because I think it's quite safe to say they neglected quite a few juicy ones last year, so maybe I'll make a video about what I don't want to see from this next season. Anyway, I'm off for a long weekend break today, so this video may be a little shorter than other ones, a little bit more casual than usual, less prep work. So without further ado, let's get started with my first of 10 things I want to see. And the first one being, acknowledging Franco Colapinto's existence. Is it really that hard to do? Netflix curates hundreds and hundreds of hours of material throughout an entire season. You are seriously telling me that it couldn't warrant at least a 10 or 15 minute subplot within a Williams story? It was absolutely egregious that we heard nothing about this. The first Argentine driver to score points in a couple of decades, and there's no hair of it. You think that Franco's appearance would have been covered in some way to appeal to the South American market. Now that's starting to come back to the fore, especially with the likes of Gabriel Bortoleto coming on song in 2025 as well. It just boggles my mind that he didn't even get a look in. I think he barely got even any screen time at all. So this year, going into Season 8, I want to see that being acknowledged as some sort of an archive to the further development of the Alpine storyline, because Alpine does feature quite a bit in Netflix's Drive to Survive by default. What with the whole Otmar Safnauer saga and the dramas and the Piastri debate, they do come up every now and again, because they used to be in parallel with McLaren in the early seasons. And we also got the arrival of Flavio in there, how he treated Jack Doohan in there, and surely Jack coming in and then Franco coming in, they'll make parallels to when Franco stepped in for Logan as one of F1's modern day super subs. And the relationship between Flavio and Franco there on the Netflix chair saying, well, I see the same thing in Franco that I saw in Fernando and Michael, and look what they're going to do, they've been championships, I can certainly see that kind of stuff, you know? I want to hear that from Briatore, because it's quite safe to say that over 2025, Franco has proven to us all that he has got balls. He has earned the respect of the Italian veteran of Formula One, who has certainly been through the mills. He certainly has done a lot of things in Formula One, and he's certainly taken up the mantle of the bad boy of Netflix's show, now that Christian Horner is, he's on pause. So yeah, I just want Franco to have his time to shine. Then I want to have a proper showcase of Carlos Sainz's integration into Williams, the Baku podium being the supposed ending, with Qatar maybe making a little bit of a cameo. This, of course, being the story of Carlos's final day with Ferrari in Abu Dhabi, where he committed everything as he possibly could to memory, and then the following day when he got in the Williams for the very first time, charting the highs and lows of integrating into that team, having some more insights into how he was gelling with James and the paddock as well. That would be a really fascinating little story, because Williams, again, does pop up in Drive to Survive quite frequently. And Carlos's transition from red to blue was one of the most interesting stories, which started off really, really shakily, but had, as we all know, that humongously, fantastically, satisfyingly good crescendo in Azerbaijan, followed by, of course, the podium in Qatar, and how Ferrari just basically let him go, and this potential going towards another team, another legacy team. Carlos Sainz now sharing the same accolade as only Alain Prost in scoring podiums for all three legacy Formula One teams to date. That is quite a major milestone and achievement, and I would love to see some more as to what was going on behind the scenes and what Carlos was thinking about. Showcase some behind the scenes family footage in his home in Madrid. Hearing about how things compare from one team to another. Really gel about what it's like for a driver going from one team, having to do it all over again with another one, and then going into 2026 and helping that team go from the bottom of the pack towards the upper midfield. In fact, leading the midfield, best of the rest of Formula 1.5. Carlos's story is a really, really good one. That needs to be covered. I am really hopeful about this one, because Carlos does show up quite a lot in previous seasons. And somewhat related is the third one. Some more candid and reflective insights into Hamilton's Ferrari struggles. This one might be a sore subject, and it might not be something that Lewis really wants to process, so I'm not holding much hope about this particular one. Certainly in terms of actually hearing from the Brit's mouth himself, because he's had to suffer a lot, and it's not the dream scenario that he once thought it was. If we did get any sound bites from him, it would be at the early stage of the season when he is still finding his feet, and naturally there would be some growing pains. When it got to the point toward the end of the year where the only nice thing he could say about his car was that, oh, the weather was nice, me driving it, that was just a really sad sight to see. But it would be really cool if we got some sort of analysis as to what was going on that wasn't clouded by the instant need of trying to get a click on a website. Just to have that, as well as just some inner thoughts about what Lewis was up to outside of Formula One. Like, maybe if Netflix were around for his first day around Maranello, or maybe if they were there in China when he got his sprint win. That might have been a high and low element. I'd just like to see a little bit more of it. Then we've had some time to reflect, and then going just 1 week later in Australia to see how things progress. Things that are a little bit less sensational. Then I would like to see the rookies have their own episode, highlighting Hajar's rise especially, as well as all of the pressure that we got from Kimi Antonelli. Although then again, considering that there was a Netflix documentary called The Seat, I doubt Antonelli will be getting much coverage because it would be just retreading old ground. We had a huge crop of rookies. They all had their moments when they really shone. Gabriel Bortoleto getting into the top 6, Q3 in a Sauber. Behrman knocking on the door of a podium in a Haas's first ever one. Then again, that might be lumped into a Haas episode because we do get one of those. Then, of course, there's Isaac Hadjar getting a podium at Zandvoort, and then going from his terrible start in Australia to that point. That would be a nice little sub-story in of itself. Going from being hugged by Anthony Hamilton to then him breaking his trophy and having that funny look, and then finally getting the call up towards the senior team of Red Bull. That journey would be immensely satisfying to see. Isaac really getting the credit served to him. And then on the other side of things, there would be the story about Jack Doohan and Franco. I mean, in fact, if we didn't get a whole Franco episode, that could easily be lumped in the Colapinto saga into that particular nugget to really just show that even though there can be moments where rookies can shine, there are situations where these days rookies really do get chewed up and spat out. So yeah, that would be cool. Then my fifth one would be having another driver cam episode akin to what we got last year around Singapore. That did actually cause some waves and really did change things up a little bit. It was one of the highlights of that season, in my opinion, because giving a couple of drivers a smartphone and asking them to document their time, ideally at a different circuit, just not Singapore all over again, was actually quite a candid way in getting to know them that little bit more. They called the shots, they filmed what they wanted, and then the producers made do with what they got, save for some extra bits and pieces to help corroborate what they were actually filming. I just found it a little bit of a novel twist that we had something where the drivers got to actually have a say in what was being showcased. That was all in the lines of what Netflix was trying to do. Therefore, I'm happy to see it again, maybe with a different bunch of drivers at a different event to really showcase how different F1 races can be. It would be really cool if it was one of those really big, significant ones, or it included one of the McLaren drivers. That'd be cool. Although I doubt it would really happen because McLaren would have probably kept things on lockdown for the sake of optics. Then, a biggie. A whole episode dedicated to the transition from Horner stepping down to Mecchi stepping up. Comments from Toto as well as probably Zach Brown, because they are all closely linked. I mean, I think this is probably one of the most obvious things, and of course this is going to be showcased, because Christian Horner has thrived on Drive to Survive, allowing them into his home. We are going to have that moment where Christian Horner comes back through the door, or not long after, he's off in the Oxfordshire countryside, reflecting on what happened, saying, oh, well, that was a whole sort of affair, you know. He's been radio silent since his stepping down from Red Bull. We've heard hide nor hair of him. But I bet you we will get shots of Christian doing an interview in civilian gear, talking about what happened and what he plans to do for the future. That first little taster of what to expect later in the year when everyone's thinking he's going to be buying into Alpine, isn't he? And then in season 9, we will get more of that in that particular subplot. And then, of course, Netflix is going to want to talk to Laura Mecchi about what he was intending to do with this senior position and how he was able to change Max Verstappen's season altogether, going from completely out of it, over 100 points behind Piastri, to then coming within 2 points of Lando Norris. That is one of the biggest comeback stories that we've seen in a very long time, even though it didn't fully convert. In the eyes of many, It was good enough, and that needs to be covered, as well as getting an understanding about what the job is for Mechis to fill in such big boots of Horners. Then number 7, there's Sauber's transition into becoming Audi with plenty of Mattia Gunther content, because that was one of the highlights of Drive to Survive in recent times, in my opinion, putting those two together. Oh, absolutely. This would be a really cool moment to see Sauber's final races and how they've been able to adapt with Jonathan Wheatley coming in, Mattia Binotto coming in to step in as Audi's new leader of the operation, as well as just the tail end of a legacy team, or almost legacy team, of Sauber when they arrived in 1993. Get to see some of their past journey with archive footage, how the times were high, the times were low, and where they are, where they ultimately came away with a really decent season. Sure, they finished 9th in the Constructors, but I'd love to see what was going on in those final races and how things were going on behind the scenes over the winter as they were changing up their presentation from Sauber to Audi. Because this is a really good moment for that operation, Audi, to really get themselves embedded amongst the casual fans, because they did a fairly good job with their launch presentation, even though they reheated the concept of November. But I could easily imagine that Audi would be more than happy to tell everyone about what they were up to over the winter in preparing themselves for 2026, finally. And I'm quite sure that Formula One, considering how enamored they were with Audi coming in the first place, would be delighted in them partaking in Netflix's wishes and whims. Then I'd like to see some talk about the Max to Mercedes storyline, even though it ultimately fizzled out. It was one of the defining stories of the year. Yes, as we saw, Max did mount a charge with Red Bull in terms of the title, and all talk of him going to Mercedes or anywhere else completely died a death. And as we have seen from a couple of interviews, Verstappen is more than happy to see out his 2028 Red Bull contract. He wants to see it through. He is dedicated to the Red Bull Ford powertrain's cause. That is not to say that what we saw did not happen. It generated a lot of headlines, a lot of content, a lot of drama. You all remember that shot of Max in front of all of those journalists with all of those speakers, him looking absolutely forlorn and depressed, not wanting to be there? That would be one of the lowest ebbs of all of that talk, the hype, the hysteria, when Red Bull were really down in the dumps, and Mercedes were circling him, trying to court him, and realistically, I think they still are, but Toto's going in an indirect fashion, as I talked about yesterday. I just feel like Netflix not talking about this in some shape or form would be a bit of a crime, because we were all talking about this for months, especially around the fact that Toto was not doing the deed with his current drivers, even though they were certainly fulfilling their paycheck and doing their job excellently in getting Mercedes to second place in the Constructors by a convincing margin, and more than half of McLaren's tally. Ninth is Adrian Newey. Just that. Showcase his first days in Aston Martin and then ending with his team principal appointment, because him leaving Red Bull was one of the biggest stories of 2024. And to have that progression carry on, with Aston Martin featuring quite a bit in Drive to Survive, we do see some moments of Papa Stroll flirting with Toto Wolff, and of course the progression, Fernando's always there, and seeing how they've changed themselves from Formula One midfielders as Jordan to now a behemoth with everything now coming online. Now with one of the most successful designers of all time at that team, we want to see some more of them, as best as we can, because he's a very busy guy. He's working on the 2026 cars. I doubt we'll get much talk, but what talk we do get, because he was around the paddock around the Monaco Grand Prix, it would have been a huge misstep if Netflix didn't at least grab him for 15 minutes asking him about how he's settling in. And then when he gets the role of team principal around the Qatar Grand Prix, that moment should have been documented as well. And with him being there would have been more time to talk to him, especially around Abu Dhabi, since everything was sorted out already and there wasn't really much to do except just get the final race done at the end of the year. So just to get some insights into what he's up to would be quite a cool idea. And then finally, a George Russell episode, highlighting his first season as team leader and watching the title fight from his point of view. We all talked about Max, Oscar, Lando as they were going for the championship. George was having his best season in the background by a colossal margin, over 300 points to attach to his name, winning for that team, leading the team, producing a car which was actually quite solid, the best of the ground effect era for that team, the least problematic, still not really showing up to the McLaren consistently, but certainly a lot better, and ultimately besting the RB21 over the course of the season, even though the Red Bull really rocketed up toward the end of it, because they were just going hell for leather. Now going into 2026, them having just launched the W17, everyone is agog as to what Russell could do. So what I would love to see throughout 2025 was Netflix just sitting down and having a chat with Russell, and Russell using this opportunity to ingratiate himself that little bit more as he starts to make himself known as Mercedes' leader. Talk about what it was like to learn under Lewis, how it is to tutor Kimi, how it was working with Bottas after his 1-year cameo, now he's off to Cadillac. Because it'd be really neat to see what was going through George's head with all of the uncertainty regarding his contract, even though he was doing the numbers, doing everything right, but that still wasn't enough for Toto to sign the dotted line earlier than he did. So I think an exercise in him acquainting himself with the casuals would be certainly a good idea, and Netflix just making the most of the fact that he was filling in the boots of Lewis Hamilton, and he did a fairly admirable job, I would say, in his first season. Next year, who knows? And let me know what you want to see and don't want to see in Season 8. I might incorporate that into the next video, but until then, check out this video right here, because I think you will definitely like this as much as you liked this video because you clicked on it. I'll see you over there.